everyone. I am so excited today to be speaking with author Jessica Brockmole, and this is her newest book, Woman Enters Left. Jessica, I don't think there are enough words to explain how amazing this book is, okay? I love this book. And I found you through Fall of Poppies, because I had interviewed Hazel and Heather, who I love dearly. They are amazing authors, and I read the book, and then I was like, I'm just going to, these are so amazing, every one of these stories. So I went and looked all of you guys up that contributed to the book, and that's how I found you. And I was like, because I figured you had a book, out, even if I only knew them. I was like, well, of course they know these other women, and I look you up, and you have a couple of amazing books that have gotten such great praise, and but this book is so amazing. I wish I could explain to everybody to go get this book, okay? And it's not long, it is little, and it is packed full of story. How you wove this story is truly, it's never, like, it has so many things. Okay, so we have the main character, Louise. I'll say she's the main character. It's not really true.
She is.
But
yeah,
she is, right? And then you have Flory and Ethel. And and they're on, and I don't give any spoilers away, so just stop me if it's more than you want me to say. But they're on these road, they're these women, these three women. We don't know in the beginning exactly how they're connected, but one is heading from LA to Jersey, and the other two are going from Jersey to LA, and it's different time, it's a different generation, okay?
Yes.
And then you're doing a screenplay that's weaving it all. I was like sitting there as I'm reading this, and I'm like near tears through most of it. And I'm like, how did she do this? How did she do this so perfectly? It was crazy ride. But you want to hear something even more bizarre. So I'm reading this. It's like the middle of the night. I have a little lamp thing that hooks onto my books so that I don't disturb, my boyfriend, and I'm reading it, and I woke him up the one night. I'm like, you are not going to believe this. This is about the Radium Girls. And he was like, okay. I'm like, because I had interviewed Kate Moore back in August, I think, and read the Radium Girls, and her and I went back and forth a lot. She's in England, and she got attacked. Did you read that book?
I didn't. It came out right around the same time as Woman Enters Left. And so I haven't been able to read it yet. Yes.
August too. Yeah, exactly. How crazy is that? So, like,
I know.
You found it as crazy as I found it? So. Yeah, so I knew as soon as we got to that point, and like I said, I don't want to give spoilers, but I wanted to tell you that as soon as we got to that point in the book where I realized it's connected, it took on this whole other, meaning for me. And, I can't believe that you both found this story. I can't believe that I live in Pennsylvania. She lives in England. You're not from Pennsylvania.
Yes.
You're not from...
No, from
and
the
you
Midwest.
guys both find this story that's closer to me, and I knew nothing about until I read her book. It's crazy. So how did you find it? How did you find that story?
I actually first came across mention of the Radium Girls in... oh my goodness, and I've forgotten the author's name. The Poisoner's Handbook?
Yes.
Yes, and which is full of different stories in different chapters of cases of examined by really early forensic scientists in sort of the New York area in the teens and the 20s and 30s, sort of right around there. And one of the chapters was about the Radium Girls, and I keep these stacks of blank note cards in my house, and whenever I come across a mention of something that I think someday in a story, I jot it on the card. So I've had the Radium Girls on a card for years, not knowing what story it was going to go in. And when I'm starting something new, I'll pull up my cards and I'll sort of spread them out, and I'll see, well, which ones go together? And I had Old Hollywood, I had Route 66, I had Radium Girls, and somehow I saw them all fitting together. And so that was my first introduction to the topic. But when I started researching, the new book has come out, but there haven't been very many published books about the Radium Girls. So I really dug into like the court documents and the medical reports and the newspaper articles, which is why some of that comes across in Woman Enters Left. I bring in those kinds of documents into how I'm telling my story, because that's how I learned primarily about the story of the Radium Girls.
And it's crazy because Kate Moore's book is
Mm-hmm.
not what you want to call historical fiction.
Yes,
Because
yes.
her book is basically, she just gave each one of those women's stories because she wanted them documented, and she did all the research and everything. I'm assuming that the characters' names in here, any of them, are not they're not Radium Girls. They're named, right?
The ones named in my fictional newspaper articles and court documents,
Okay.
the others referred to that came before my fictional characters, those are real names.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like trying to put them together a little bit, but I I don't know if I'm the only person that when I'm reading about the Radium Girls, I start to like roll my teeth because they all had so many, teeth issues that I'm like, oh, okay.
They did, and it's really horrifying to read about some of that, the things that they went through, and I was cringing, and like you were saying, they were losing teeth, they were losing parts of their jaws.
I know.
The fact that this happened so much later, and that doctors were willing to dismiss these symptoms of all of these women who had been in the same place, and not just dismissing them, but dismissing them in belittling ways.
Right.
Like, oh, those must be STDs that you have because you're all immigrant women who, are working class. So not just not listening to them, but pushing them aside and adding an additional label
to it. Yeah, mm-hmm. You have no idea. Like, I always, after I read her book and now reading your book, I'm like, wow, I wish my grandmothers were still around. My one grandmother was born in 24, though, so I'm not sure, like that was too close. I don't know what she would have heard. But my other grandmother was like 1915. And I was like, I wish I would have, I didn't know about it, but I wish I had her here to say, like, especially living right here, like, what did you hear? But the thing that's so, like, people, when they hear about them, they're like, well, why would they do that? Well, A, they didn't know. B, they were making great money for women back in those days.
Absolutely. In what were fairly easy working conditions. They weren't standing, in a factory line. They weren't doing a lot of really heavy labor. They sat on a stool and they painted, and they were able to sort of relax and chat with their friends for the most part, from a lot of accounts that I read. Working in this all-female environment, it had to feel like a really good situation for a lot of these women.
Oh, I can't imagine. I mean, and they thought they were contributing to World War I.
Yes.
They thought they were making a huge contribution. So it was their way, because women couldn't really serve in too many other ways if they weren't a nurse or anything. So they also felt like, oh, I'm doing this thing that's going to help these guys overseas. And, and little did they know, what was happening. But the way you describe at the one point when she was putting on, I don't remember which one was putting on makeup on the other one, because the thing that they were really good with was, a brush.
Was painting with a brush, yes. Really small. I mean, I can't even imagine the dexterity it takes to paint numbers on a watch dial by hand.
No, I can't imagine either. And there's not that many, because of that time period, we don't really know, we have some pictures of what it looked like, but, not a lot of pictures of what it looked like. But
and the thing that always really stands out in the story, in the history that you read too about the Radium Girls, is they're painting these watch dials with glow-in-the-dark paint that was infused with radium, and like any sort of young person with something new. Oh, this glows in the dark. Let me paint my fingernails. Let me paint my eyelids and my lips. Let me just see what this is going to be like when I get home, and I go out with my boyfriend and he sees "I love you" painted on my eyelids. Why not? It seems like fun, not knowing what they were putting on their body.
Yeah. Well, I thought the way that you put it in the story using fictional characters, I mean, as the story builds, I loved how it went from, they were feeling a little sick, to the way you build on it. I mean, like I said, I'm having, these kind of books I have such a hard time talking about, because I'm trying to, like, circle not talking about me.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about you.
Okay.
I could do that. How did you, what is your story? I found out very little about you, just so you know. Some people have I find out lots of
such
things.
a mystery.
Now you're a mystery. So let's find out about you and your writing experience and how you got to, this is not your first book, and we'll talk about your other books, but how did you, get to this point?
Well, I was always writing, which I guess is not an unusual beginning to most writers' stories.
Right.
As a kid, I was a huge reader. I would ride my bike up to the local library in the summer every single day and return with a whole bike basket full of books, and then return them the next and get another stack. And I was afraid that I was going to read all the books in the library. And so I thought I should...
fear too. Me too. Because I lived in a place that had a small library. I was like, what am I going to do?
It was a small library, and it seemed big to my little eyes, but I thought I had to start writing my own books if I wanted to always have something on the shelf to read. So I was always writing a lot of sort of Little House on the Prairie fan fiction, really. I wrote a lot of pioneer fiction, a lot of choose your own adventure stories. I have a really good one in my Hope chest upstairs about a ballet dancer I wrote in 3rd grade.
Where did you grow up? What state?
And I sort of stepped away from that in college and graduate school. I studied linguistics, but still being very tied to language.
Right.
I still was very interested in language. And it wasn't until my daughter was born and she was 2 weeks old that I really turned back to writing fiction and doing it pretty seriously. We moved to Scotland when she was a couple years old, and it was while living in Scotland that I wrote what became my first novel, Letters from Skye. Mm-hmm. And it was the first novel that I wrote, but I wrote 3 other novels before I had found an agent and signed with that agent. And those were all novels that I was writing and revising and querying and getting feedback on and hopefully improving myself. So by the time my agent went to sell Letters from Skye, I had learned a lot more and was able to look back at it with a little bit more of an experienced eye. And that was the book that we ended up selling first.
Well, first of all, what state did you grow up in?
Michigan.
Oh, okay. So you're not that far. But yeah, and when I read all the reviews about Letters from Skye, I was like, I wish I would have read it, I don't have time, but I wish I would have read it because I read the story in Fall of Poppies and then I read this one, and I know that after all the reviews, I can tell how fantastic it is. But just so everybody understands, Letters from Skye was 2014. Okay.
2013.
Okay, 2013. Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe one of the editions came out in something. But anyway, and then you wrote At the Edge of Summer, and Fall of Poppies then was a short story, but that's right away. And then this one comes in 2017. So you're writing your heart out right now.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's hard not to write, and sometimes I have false starts when I'm starting something new. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out the story I'm trying to tell. So, I have a number of things sort of languishing on my hard drive that maybe will never be finished, but maybe I'll come back to someday. But it's hard not to write, especially when I'm always coming across new ideas. I'm never at a loss for ideas and pieces of history I want to explore, and I have all those index cards.
Yeah. Well, and one of the interesting parts about this book, that you've thought of the idea of making the one woman a screenwriter, mm-hmm. and then weaving that tale. That was just, in case I didn't say it enough, I really loved that part. I really did. I'd never read anything like that kind of carries the story and then their feelings of what they're going through. And then I saw that Letters from Skye were about 2 generations of letters, so I can see, I see what you do, and it's like, you are so brilliant at that.
Things like that.
Right? Well, it's brilliant because it's taking different generations and connecting them, mm-hmm. And I love that. And
actually, when I started writing Letters from Skye, the reason that I started writing it as an epistolary novel, the reason I had the character sort of introduce themselves through letters was that in the past, my novels before then that I hadn't finished, I'd had a lot of trouble with dialogue. And I thought, well, as an exercise, I'm going to try writing this next in letters, because what are exchange letters other than just sort of a written conversation, written dialogue, exchange of dialogue. So it sort of started as an exercise, but I loved being able to tell the story through the characters' own words, and I thought it was a very organic way to get to know them, and I still do. And so even if I'm writing something in sort of just a straight narrative without letters, I still often try to meet my characters through a letter, introducing themselves to me. I find that's a great way to find their voice.
Yeah, and you do that a couple of times in here, too. I mean, because there's still letters being exchanged.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's other aspect of this. But that's why it was such a... I read it so fast, and then I was like, I'm done. Because it's such a quick read, because there are so many elements that are coming together, and as I'm, connecting them, I'm like, it's so amazing. So, what was At the Edge of Summer? So that was so you had Letters from Skye, and that was amazing, and that did really well. And then what was At the Edge of Summer? What was that about?
And At the Edge of Summer, so Letters from Skye is set during World War I and World War II, all told through letters. And At the Edge of Summer is not told through letters, although there is a big segment in the middle, sort of bridging some time. And it sprang out of some research I had stumbled across, one of those little corners that I jotted on a card while researching Letters from Skye, about a studio in Paris during and so at the end of and after World War I. And it was a studio run by the Red Cross and a Boston socialite and artist named Anna Coleman Ladd, who made copper masks for French soldiers who had had scarring and injury from the war.
That's cool.
And instantly fascinated by this idea, needed to know more, and writing the sort of romantic fiction that I do, could see a romantic scene right away, which is what I use to springboard the rest of the story.
Right.
So I have a Scottish artist working in the studio, and when a soldier comes in one day and she starts to sketch his face in preparation for a mask, she sees on the page in front of her the face of the childhood sweetheart that she thought she lost in the war.
That's so good. How do are you an outliner? Do you outline this all out? No.
Not at all. So I had that idea in mind. I started by writing out that scene, not knowing where in the book it would fall, and it falls maybe about halfway in the book, and then built a story around it. So it ended up being a story about war and recovery and art and self-expression and a lot of themes like this.
Mm-hmm. So you really know what you're going to do, and then you just kind of go at it when you get
I have no idea what I'm going to do.
Oh, you figure it out. And then
I figure it out. I usually have the very last scene in mind for all of my books. I can picture in my mind what happens at the end. Sometimes I write that down, sometimes I don't, but as long as I have my characters, I just sit down and I sort of discover the story along with them.
Interesting, because you did end this book the way I wanted it to end, but I wasn't convinced that you were going to end it the way I want. I was really happy with the ending. That's all I'm going to say, but I'm going to say that I wasn't sure that that's what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I was very not convinced that was what was going to happen. So that's
right.
hard.
I wasn't even sure that was the right ending, even though I had that in mind. Mm-hmm. Although I haven't yet, I still leave myself open to going a different direction.
Right.
If that story dictates.
That's awesome. So, all right, so this one came out in August. Is there anything coming out that's already at?
There's nothing on the schedule yet.
Okay.
I'm still in the midst of
writing.
Figuring it out and writing, yeah.
Well, obviously, these books don't take you that long. I mean, they're coming out pretty quickly. So, 6 months of writing or?
It varies. So, At the Edge of Summer took... Well, first drafts are usually about a year for me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm working on more than one thing at once. Sometimes the revisions take longer. So, yeah. So it varies. At the Edge of Summer in total took me a little longer to write than Woman Enters Left. I had so much fun writing Woman Enters Left. Not to say I didn't have fun with At the Edge of Summer, but something about the story just kept my fingers flying and I couldn't stay away.
Yeah, isn't that such a great feeling when you find a story that you can't stay away, that, you know, has you so excited that you just can't wait to write it out, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how I felt with this. And I want people to see this cover, okay? I thought it was so perfect. I mean, you look at this cover and you automatically know, like, where it's where it's going to start off. You know, you can see it. I mean, with the car and the woman.
The cover. I like the a novel on the car too. That little detail.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah, look at that. I didn't even see that, actually. That's awesome, because I was so attracted to her. Like, you know, she's such that.
Oh, yeah. She looks like she's not messing around. She's going to figure things out by the end of the book. You just know it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I love old movies. I love movies from the 40s and 50s. I'm fascinated by them. And you really captured, because it's a different time. How movie stars are now is not how they were then. With the contracts and very few movie MGM.
Studio system. Yeah.
It was a lot different, because they had, like, they would say, well, I'm going to make 5 movies for you. And I don't really think it's like that anymore. I think that time period, you know, really captured, like, what those actresses were fighting for and trying to do.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and I thought that you got, because I've watched a lot of old movies and I was like, oh yeah, I can totally see, you know, like, her character. And then what would happen is they would age, you know, they'd get, especially, you know, you don't really get that anymore, but they would get to like 30 or 40, and then that was it. Like, they get replaced by younger right away, because at that time they wanted the younger, you know. Now the actresses are making it, you know. Movies are different. There are older, you know, places. So it was interesting.
As different as the studio system was from now, I mean, women in Hollywood are fighting a lot of the same issues that I have Louise fighting for different roles, better
scripts,
representation, better expression, more involvement. It's really, that was one of the sobering things as I was doing my research, is that we have come far, that Hollywood has come far, but obviously, you know, especially in light of recent news, how far it hasn't come. Yeah.
I know. And of course I'm reading this book and all that stuff is coming out, and I was just like, really? Really? I mean, these actresses were not old, you know, so it is really sad to think, because I personally thought that was over with. I really did, you know, so it is kind of sad to think. Hopefully now it's going to be a little bit.
It would be nice to see some changes.
It would be nice to see some changes, but, because that threw me, but yeah, I mean, I loved that I got the feel when she was talking to her agent. Because it was so different. That was another thing, like, that was different too. Their agent, it's like, if you're not doing it, then I can get another agent. I can get another. But back then, it was like, there were only so many agents. And your agent, you had a relationship with your entire, you know, career. So, you know, I love that. I love that every time I turned a page, it was something different. I love that about it. I really did. I can't say enough. Everybody, go get this book, okay? Woman Enters Left. And I see it is doing amazing on Amazon. You have so many great reviews for it. So I'm sure that makes you really happy.
It does. Yeah. It does. I was so happy to see it out there in the world, and I'm glad that everyone's enjoying reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it.
Yeah, and please let me know, like, when you have something else coming up.
All right.
Please just, you know, make it. I see you on you know, social media, and it's like, just, you know, put it out there so we can all read it, because I can't wait.
Right.
I can't wait. So thank you so much, Jessica. I'll have all of Jessica's links so you can find her book, and we'll talk soon, okay?
All right.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.